It's really quite an honor to be here in this building named for my old friend Marty Murray, and it's actually a little more emotional than I anticipated it to be. Marty cried when I left Wyoming to come to Alaska. I guess we both did. But I am lachrymose intolerant, and so I'd like to move on before I start crying now. Thanks for coming tonight. For those of you who just got out of the house for some cheap entertainment, there will be some photos later to look at, so don't worry. But I'm going to talk a little bit first. For those of you who came to support the Snedden Chair, thank you very much. I mean, it's a really cool program, and through the hard work of Virginia Fournier and the people at the journalism department at UAF, some real journalistic luminaries have been brought to this campus and brought to this town. Now, in order to manage expectations here, I need to explain to you the difference between a luminary and a luminaria. A luminary is somebody who's like so bright that their brilliance shines into the dark craniums of our brains and makes us brighter in the process. Unfortunately, that's not what you've got tonight. A luminaria, or at least a luminary as we practice it in Alaska, is like a 5-gallon bucket of water. It's frozen into a giant chunk of ice. It's got a little votive candle in it. And you put it along the driveway to lead people into your New Year's Eve party. And inevitably, on the way out, some drunk kicks it and breaks his foot. Okay. That's what you've got tonight. It's sort of dim bulb that might lead you to the party, but if you kick me on the way out, you may break your foot. So remember that. Although I hope you will take some kicks at me, because at the end I'd really like to answer questions, so please have some. I can't take questions in the middle because I'll wander off the reservation and never get back. So at the end, I hope you guys think of some stuff. As Brian noted, the last 36 hours in Alaska have absolutely changed the topography of journalism in this state. It is going to be seen as a historic day, I think. And talk about a paradigm shift. Wow. So we can talk about that when I'm done. It has become fashionable for journalists of my era, i.e. long in the tooth, at events like this to bemoan the passing of a golden age and talk about how good it used to be and how bad it sucks now. I'm not going to do there. You've been there, done that. I'm actually very optimistic about the future, but I'm not a Pollyanna. I've been there and done that, and by that I mean I've really been there and I've really done it. The last years that I was at the Daily News, I laid off half of the photo staff, all of them award-winning journalists, all of them hardworking people, all of them friends of mine. I spent my last years there dismantling what I had built up brick by brick over 25 years. So I know the dark side of it. I know the decline of the newspaper industry. So when I say I'm optimistic, I am not just throwing out some theory there. I've actually been on the bottom side of things and think there's some neat stuff happening. And I think among the things that we lose sight of are the really big changes. This is a huge desk. It scares the shit out of me. There's some huge things that really have changed. When I started in this business, there were very few people who actually knew how to make a picture. And some of the students in the audience may not understand it, but there's enough silver hair out there that I know that you guys do remember a time where really a very small percentage of the population had the skill to take a technically adequate picture, especially of something moving, process the film, make a print, and then get it on the wall or get it to the copy editor's desk by deadline. And there was a very good reason for that. You know, if you had a child who had musical talent and you had the money and the room, you'd buy a piano and you'd put it in the living room and your child would practice there, and when anybody came to your house they would be treated to, you know, Beethoven concertos, even though the vast majority of them would not want to listen to a Beethoven concerto played by Beethoven himself, let alone by a 12-year-old. But that's what you would do. And if your child was a photographic prodigy and you had the space and the money, you'd go to the darkest, dankest corner of your basement and you would build a little closet with no ventilation and a door that was so tight that none of the darkness could leak out. And that's where your child would spend their adolescence, snorting really toxic chemistry. And reasonably, not very many people wanted to do that. Not many people were willing to devote the time to learn the tradecraft because it took years. And so as a result, you ended up with this sort of cult. And it was a cult of weirdos. I'll tell you, I'm one of the only normal people that came out of that process. But it was this very, you know, self-selecting group. And out of that group, you know, over time, after years, the child would come out of the darkroom with this marketable skill. And some small number of them would decide, well, now that I've got this marketable skill, let's not earn a living. Let's go change the world. I'll become a photojournalist and starve. So that narrows the group even further. But in those days, that didn't make you a photojournalist or a journalist at all, because you needed to work for someone. Someone needed to give you a job because that was the only way you could distribute your work. And so that narrowed it even further. And so you ended up with a very small group of photojournalists who were predominantly male, predominantly white, predominantly from the lower middle class. They were the same kind of guys. And there were some amazingly talented, amazingly skilled, amazingly dedicated people. But it was a small bit of the population. Now, every 13-year-old kid in North America has that tradecraft. Any 13-year-old now can go out, take a technically adequate picture, and wander in an internet cafe and publish it to the world. So this very steep pyramid has been completely flattened. And that's a good thing. At the moment, it's kind of an ugly thing. But it's better that more people can do this than to have less people doing it. And I think if you think of fine art photography, I think we're going to see an enormous revolution there in the kinds of artwork that is produced with cameras, because no longer is it just open to the cult members who wanted to spend all this time in the dark. It is, these tools are open to anyone with a creative bent and with a visual acuity can now use photography for their art. And so I think we're going to see some amazing stuff, and stuff that doesn't come from the descendants of Ansel Adams and Edward Weston. It's going to be new stuff, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be because it's coming from different people. And I think that's really exciting. And the same thing is going to happen with photojournalism. There used to be a cliche, in fact there still is a cliche that we use in photojournalism to make fun of ourselves, which is F8 and be there, which essentially means minimal technical skill, but being where stuff's happening. And now the F8 thing is gone because everybody has the technical skill, and suddenly it's all about being there. And I think we've seen that during the Arab Spring this year, within this last year, of citizen photojournalists in places where professional photojournalists were, who were informing us, the rest of the world, on what's happening. Now, was there screw-ups? Of course there were. Is there unethical stuff going on? Of course there is. Hopefully this is going to sort itself out. I believe it is going to sort itself out. But I think in terms of democracy and in terms of journalism, it's better to have more people doing this than less people. I think there's always going to be a place for professionally trained people, but many of those professionally trained people now may be largely curating the work of this vast network of people with the skill to take a picture that can be published. And this is where all of you guys come in. This is not, you know, some distant academic lecture. I'm talking about you guys in your town, in your life, because you can participate in that if you choose to, because you've got the skill to do it, and you've got the equipment. All of you is packing one of these, and if you're not, you will be. And you can take marvelous pictures with these things, and I'm going to show you some of them and how you can do it. And whether you choose to send pictures to the Fairbanks News Miner or Alaska Dispatch / Daily News or not, these pictures are still important. And there may be an issue that you think is important enough that you want to give these guys pictures. I'm not suggesting that you work for free to, you know, improve the corporate profits of Dean Singleton or Alice Rogoff. But there may be something in your life that's important enough that you want those pictures in the paper, that you want them distributed. And you've got the ability to do this. Because you all practice photojournalism. You all practice a form of personal photojournalism when you take pictures of your family and you take pictures of your travels. And those pictures are really important. Those pictures talk about who we are, who we were, and therefore the generations ahead. And they're pictures that are worth taking time to do well. Because you no longer have to be a member of the cult. You can do it. You can take good pictures and have these very important documents for your family and your future. Part of my career was spending 25 years looking at pictures of natural disasters all across North America, and repeated time and time again, whether it was the floods in Louisiana or forest fires in Colorado or the weekly tornado in Oklahoma, the same thing would happen. You would see people in the aftermath trying to save their photographs. All of the material possessions in their world had been destroyed, but the thing they were trying to save were the pictures, which were irreplaceable. Those were the things that were important to them. In the poorest neighborhoods of New Orleans, there were clotheslines strung between houses with photographs from scrapbooks, photographs that had been hanging on the wall, drying. Pictures of people no longer alive. Pictures of people no longer young, now old. Pictures of people when they were in the military. Pictures of people when they got married. Important pictures that spoke to their lives. And that is what they tried to save. And it wasn't just the poor neighborhoods in New Orleans. In the richest neighborhoods in Colorado, which were the ones that burned, you would see people going through the remains of their McMansions trying to find the photo album that didn't burn, or the photograph that saved. And so it's worthwhile to do this well. It's worthwhile to take those pictures that we all take and do a good enough job so that they do last. It's not about technique anymore. It used to be about this incredibly complicated craft, and now it is not. It is mostly, frankly, just about paying attention and taking a picture carefully. Siddhartha Gautama, the guy who became the father of Buddhism, would call it mindfulness. Deepak Chopra, the father of the modern self-awareness movement, would call it present moment awareness. Dick Murphy, the father of me, would say, and frankly did say very many times, for Christ's sake, just pay attention to what you're doing. And all three of these great philosophers are saying the same thing. That just, if you're going to do it, pay attention to what you're doing and do it right. So we're going to look at some pictures. Many of the pictures are chosen particularly because they're not necessarily outrageous photographs. The reason these lights don't work is not my fault. It's his fault. Yeah, both sides work, but and he's the department head. There's nothing I can do. We have to do it his way. All right, we'll do battling switches. The problem is there's a delay.
Yeah, that's I work for Alice, so.
You know, maybe Alice should come up here then. It is your fault.
Well, there's another button right there too, Rob.
Up here? So I try a third one?
Yeah.
Thank you. You have somewhat redeemed yourself. So I want to talk a little bit about how I discovered cell phone photography, and it was an epiphany. And I am sorry to say my life has not been rife with epiphanies. Most of what I have learned has been just tiny scraps torn out of the tapestry of experience and life and then glued back together in some semblance of knowledge or wisdom. But in this case, I actually had an epiphany. And man, I wish I'd had more of them. It really is a cool way to learn stuff. It's a lot easier. And it happened to me on a flight from here to Toronto, going to a wedding a couple of years ago. And as everybody in this room understands, and no one else in America understands, to fly from Alaska to Toronto, of course, you have to go through Newark. So this is the epiphany of Newark. We flew there, and my traveling companion is sick as a dog. And as you know, Alaska to Newark is a long time to be as sick as a dog. And we had a layover of 3 hours in Newark, so we went and found an empty gate with nobody in it, and sort of, as Alaskans who travel know, sort of set up camp there in this empty gate. She immediately fell asleep. I immediately became bored. And I took my camera and my carry-on luggage and stuck it under her feet and then wandered off to entertain myself around the airport and get some exercise. And I came back, you know, I have to admit, it was probably an hour later. And I saw this sort of George O'Keeffe hand sticking out of this coat. And I said, oh man, that's a picture. My camera bag is under her feet. And so it all goes away if I try to do that. But I've got this new, well, it isn't a new camera. It's a hand-me-down camera from my son who moved on to bigger and better things, and I got the cast-offs. So I had, I think it was an old iPhone 3G, and I thought, well, I'll try this, you know, and I'll see what it works. Because I'd played with it on the plane over. I'd spent hours sort of trying to figure out how it works. And there's only about 4 things you need to know to make a cell phone work. The problem is most people don't bother to learn what those 3 or 4 things are. So I had gone through it and figured it out. And so I went to take a picture of her. And of course, it's a wide angle lens. So you get closer and you get closer and you get closer. And this picture's taken from about 3 feet away. And so I'm hovering right over her, taking this picture. And then my peripheral vision kind of kicks in, and I realize we're no longer in an empty gate. That in the hour I've been gone, it's been populated by people. So now there's people sitting all around, none of whom saw me walk in with this woman, none of whom saw me leave. And so I'm just this weirdo who showed up in the gate, and this poor woman is passed out, and this guy is predating on her. And I'm expecting the long hand of John Law to rest on my shoulders. But I slowly stand up and look around, and no one has noticed a thing. Why? Because all of their faces are buried in their handheld devices. They're there playing angry turds or whatever they are on their phones. And so a guy with his face in a handheld device is nothing to them. And this was a huge moment for me. Because as a photojournalist, you spend your entire career trying to be invisible. You try to be a fly on the wall. You want to be wallpaper. Not to take photographs surreptitiously, but so that you are not part of the scene that you're trying to photograph. And you go to enormous effort to develop this skill. You develop photographic skills to achieve that. You develop interpersonal skills to achieve that. You buy equipment that you think will help you get there. But nothing makes you as invisible as these cell phones, because it's like no big deal. Your face is stuck in one, so is everybody else's. So this was a great thing, and I'm going to show you some pictures that actually I don't think I could have taken except with a cell phone camera. So we went to the wedding, and of course at a wedding, everybody's armed and dangerous, you know, and you just talk about blending in. But it's different, you know, when you walk up with that big camera, that's when people put down their drinks and put their heads together. You know, so you get one of those pictures where it looks like everybody's standing on a really cheap mattress that has sunk in the middle, because everybody thinks, they all think that you're shooting with like a 300mm lens, and so their heads have to be touching. So everybody's leaning this way, and the other people are all leaning this way, and you get this completely phony picture. But when no one is paying attention to you, you get to take pictures of the real thing. And you get to take, you know, a picture like this, which I like this picture. You know, it's a fun little wedding photograph, but the bride didn't stop when she was walking by to get into the limo. When I was there with the camera, because I wasn't there with a camera. I was just there with a cell phone. And so she just walked on by. And it made this picture possible. And I'm going to show you some portraits that I don't think would have been possible without using the cell phone. And these are, as I said, these are not remarkable photographs. I've chosen them specifically because I think they're very accessible pictures, and I think anyone in this room could have taken them and can take them. And the idea is for you to understand that this is absolutely possible. And not only is it possible, you should do it. You should take good pictures. I beseech you, do not take crappy pictures. You don't have to anymore. For decades, you had to because you didn't know how. But now, you know how, and you can do it. So this is my son's roommate. I spent about 10 days in this apartment in Denver. This is a kid who's a young artist. And this blank canvas towered over this apartment the entire time I was there. He was waiting for inspiration to strike. And I made this picture of him. He's actually on what was my bed. And he is seeing that my camera bag is just out of the frame of this picture. And I could have reached over and grabbed my camera, but it would have changed things. He would have changed. He would have straightened up. He would have lifted his head. He would have looked at me. But I just pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and made what is really a pretty accurate portrait of this kid. Very pensive, dark sort of kid. And this actually captures him very well. It's not a brilliant photograph, but it is a real good picture of this person. And it's because the camera did not interfere with it. Because these kids are completely used to people having their faces in their camera. In fact, I'll bet that Zach's got his phone in his right hand there. I'll bet dollars to donuts. These kids always had them with it. It drove me crazy in this apartment. They'd have parties, and there'd be girls there, and there'd be illegal liquor there. And it was like a perfect setup for a good time. And everybody would be texting. They'd all be, and I'd say, that's a girl over there. That's a girl, and she's clearly bored because she's texting another girl who's at another party. Put your phone down, go over and talk to her. Talk to her. And then I realized sometimes they were actually texting each other across the room. But the point is, they're so used to it that me pulling out a camera or a cell phone did not make any difference. And so I started on a series of portraits of artists. Here's another artist. I went into the dean's office not to take a picture of him. I think he probably called me in for advice on how to run the College of Liberal Arts. I don't remember exactly why I was there. But Todd had some paperwork to finish up, and again, I get bored easily, and I took out I had seen these animals at the Wells Street Gallery. I didn't realize they'd migrated to his office, and I thought it was really cool they were there. And so I made this picture, and for anyone who's been on the receiving end of that arched eyebrow and that sort of stink eye look, you'll know that that's Todd Sherman. I mean, you recognize that. And so it's actually a pretty decent picture of the guy, I think. But I also love these two pictures together. And for any of you young people in the room, whether you're aspiring journalists or aspiring painters or aspiring writers or inspired people who want to be scientists, whatever you want to be, think of these two pictures in the great quote by the artist Chuck Close, who said, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just get to work. Here's a guy who's clearly got a couple of things on his plate, manages to produce the work, okay? So, this is inspiration. This is getting to work, okay? And so, if the students in this room walk out of here getting nothing other than that, you're really ahead of the game. Remember that. The difference between inspiration and just getting to work. That's what this is, getting to work. Another artist, not a brilliant portrait, but a good moment. This is Dean Krakel, who's the sports photo editor of the Denver Post, another guy who works pretty hard. This is after a 16-hour day of chasing Peyton Manning and John Elway around Denver. Came home just to grab a beer and get the last moments of sunlight in his driveway as Alaskans can appreciate. It's in the fall, the end of the season. You may never see the sun again. And the evening's there and you're going to sit outside and get that last thing. Again, my camera bag is right inside that car. And Dean's, you know, he's a photographer. He's used to that. But Dean was going to have to move for me to get my camera. Again, I was able to slip the camera out, make this portrait. I did, for the record, put my beer down. But only for a moment. And Dean didn't change his expression one iota. And I was able to make this picture because of that. And it captured just a moment. Here's a local artist, Jason Lazarus, who Jason takes pictures. He's a cult member, by the way. He's a cult member. He specializes in a darkroom process called Van Dyke Brown, and shoots these old mines. It was a process that was popular about the time of the gold rush, so it fits perfectly with Jason's work. He has a show right now down at the Fairbanks Community Museum. It's worth checking out. There's only, I think, 7 pictures there, but they're worth seeing. They're pretty neat, ghostly kinds of things of some of the abandoned gold mines around Fairbanks. This, too, I think, captures Jason's bubbly manner in a good way. Is Kaji, and another amazing thing about these cameras is they take pictures in places where there's no light at all. And for those of you who saw Kaji's amazing show over at the Fine Arts Building on campus, you know it's dark in this room. It's available darkness. It's really dark, and just to be able to capture that without enormous heroic lengths is pretty cool, to be able to just make this kind of image. Here's another cult member. If Jason's a member of the cult, this is a high priestess of the cult. This is Alice Bailey, who is showing the grad photo students copperplate photogravures, which are what Edward Curtis took his photographs with. And you might not be familiar with Edward Curtis's name, but you are familiar with his photographs. Basically, the photographs that you have seen of American Indians around the turn of the century almost surely are Edward Curtis. Took some amazing pictures of Alaska natives around the turn of the century. And actually, you sometimes see those in First National Bank of Alaska has a bunch of them that they framed and have in some of their branches. Alice has got an amazing show up right now at the Well Street Gallery of these photogravures that is well worth seeing. It's hanging there with a very talented printmaker, Corinna Gomez. Great show. If you haven't seen it, you ought to go check it out. This is Alice making a presentation to the grad photo class. Again, just a moment where you could slip the camera out and make a photograph. But then you head down the rabbit hole. This is an iPhone picture taken by Charles Mason of me taking an iPhone picture of Alice Bailey, who is showing us photographs that she took with her camera in front of a backdrop of photographs that Charles had taken with a bigger camera. So, like I say, once you head down the rabbit hole, there's no coming back. This actually, maybe this is inspiration striking. This is the poet and art critic Katie Medred down in Anchorage. And again, just a quiet moment that you happen to be there and you can catch. And I realize that most of you have no interest in compiling a portfolio of photographs of artists. But you are and have been in the process of collecting portfolio of pictures of your family. And actually, Katie is like family to me, so this is very much a family picture for me. These pictures are important. They really are. And there was no big thing about making this picture, but it's a pretty decent picture. I used to use the term deliberate, but Bernadette cured me of that because it sounded too boring. But you take pictures deliberately. You just think for a minute about doing it, and it's all it takes. A boy and his dog. How many times have you shot that? It doesn't get simpler. You know, another boy and his dog. You know, these are not spectacular things. They're easy to do. You just need to kind of pay attention to what you're doing. You don't have to show the whole bunkhouse and then the ranch behind it. You know, you're taking a picture of the person. It's like, and you've all seen this picture. This is the picture from Mabel and my trip to Greece. And this is Mabel in the Parthenon. And you can see that's the city of Athens behind. And then there's the Aegean Sea. And if you look carefully, you can see North Africa over there. No, she's in the front. No, that's the ice cream vendor. No, that's her in the flowered dress over here. You don't need to take that picture. If you're taking a picture of the Parthenon, take a picture of the Parthenon. If you're taking a picture of your traveling companion, take a picture of them. Just think about what you're doing. Take the stuff out of the picture that doesn't help you. a boy in his boat. You'd think the color has shifted in this, but it hasn't. He really was that red. And this is the difference between boating in the Rockies and boating in Alaska. Another boy in his boat. Hopefully his mother will never see this picture. We killed poor Luke Jaeger this day. And he must have sensed it. You know, I think he must have known what was coming. Another boy in his boat. A boy in his boat with his iPhone in a waterproof case. Okay. A boy in a boat with his iPhone in a waterproof case with a leash on it. Okay. A waterproof case that sinks out of sight is of no use to you. So worth remembering both parts of it. And this is my charming son. At a time when he had reached the apex of his life, he was a salesman for the Oakley sunglasses store, and he had this poster in his apartment. And again, not a brilliant photograph, but a photograph that for our family is going to last, because this really speaks to this kid at this time in his life. He has this lovely haircut, and he's got this poster, and of course he's shirtless because he has such a beautiful body that it would be a crime to cover it up. But it speaks very much to a time in his life and a time in our life, and it's a good, accurate portrait of him. How simple could it be? Boy, wall, okay? Nothing complicated here. But it's a picture that will last. It's a picture that I'll have for a long time. It's a picture his children will see, I hope no time soon. But this is a picture that will stick around. And it was just because it was taken deliberatively, it was taken carefully, nothing really fancy about it. But it's not just about people. There's moments that are, I mean, this is up on Old Murphy Dome Road. A moment that you just see. You're not planning on shooting it. You're not setting it up, but you are walking by and you see this moment happen, and you've got this thing in your pocket. And if you've practiced even a little bit, you can have the skill to capture it. This is from a very simple project, which was a calendar I shot completely with a cell phone camera in one garden. And one of the great things that photography has done for me is made me appreciate the beauty around me. You know, photography has paid the bills the entire time I've been an adult. But the real value that photography has given to me and can give to you is an appreciation for the beauty that's around you. I live a richer life than most people because I live in a more beautiful world than most people, simply because I pay attention to what's around me. Now, admittedly, I'm easily distracted. You know, I can look at a chain link fence covered with frost for a long time, and in Fairbanks, you could lose a whole winter doing that. But truly, I mean, when you're looking, you see more. And when you're trying to take pictures, it forces a discipline to your eye that makes you see things that you were walking by before. And Lord knows there's enough ugliness in the world that you ought to get to see some of the beauty. And using this simple tool can help you do it. And this made, you know, a decent calendar. You know, it's not rivaling Ansel Adams in sales, but I got to see some pretty cool stuff. And, you know, man, there is no better way to start a day than with a nice big black cup of coffee and you wander out into a garden. I couldn't grow this, somebody else's garden. And look at the flowers when the first light hits them before it melts the frost, before it evaporates the dew. And you just force yourself to see really beautiful stuff. And then if you're like me, you kick your coffee cup over because you were taking pictures instead of taking care of the coffee. But, you know, what a great thing. What a great way to start a day. But you wouldn't necessarily go out and do it if you weren't thinking, God, you know, I bet there's a decent picture out there. I bet if I go out there, I'll see something cool. And it doesn't have to be in a garden. This is a freaking alley in Denver. I had time to kill and, you know, wandered down this alley. And saw some neat stuff, just fun stuff that was eye candy for me. And I got more enjoyment out of this alley than probably any sober person in the history of Larimer Square. But I'm not an urban guy. This stuff doesn't generally turn me on. But I got to see beauty in a place that I didn't expect it, merely because I was looking. Merely because I was looking. Okay, these are some pictures, most of which were not shot with an iPhone. These are pictures from my winter here in Fairbanks, and it's part of an exhibit that is going to be opening on May 2nd at the Wells Street Gallery, very generously funded by the Snedden Chair Foundation to allow me to experiment with photography and with different forms of photojournalism. This picture I took because I was on assignment for Rob Prince for his storytelling evening, which is going to be April 19th at Pioneer Park, 8 o'clock at night. He's going to have a bunch of people come in and tell true stories. Is it called The Dark of Night?
Dark Winter Night.
Dark Winter Night. I was out trying to take pictures of Dark Winter Night. But one of my goals when I came to Fairbanks and thought about having this show, because part of the Snedden gig is that in addition to your teaching responsibilities, they expect you to pursue your professional work, to continue doing whatever it is you're supposed to do. Taking pictures is what I do. And so I really wanted to photograph the Fairbanks winter, which I want to let you know you've disappointed me very much in that. I was the only person in Fairbanks this winter wishing it would get colder. Because I wanted to experience 50 below. I've lived in Anchorage for 25 years. I get winter, I get dark, but you guys are in a different league. And I really wanted to visually understand that. I really wanted to get into ice fog. I wanted to photograph it. I wanted to see what that was all about. And so I was fairly terrified about halfway through the winter when I realized it wasn't happening and I still had this show that I was going to do. But one of the things that caught me, and I suspect you guys don't even know because you live here, but you guys have the opposite of what everybody else has. The standard paradigm visually for winter are black trees against white snow, black bare branches against a white sky. It's in the photographs of Harry Callahan, it's in the poems of Robert Frost. It's the model, it's the paradigm, it's what winter looks like. But you guys have the negative of that. You've got these white trees against this black sky, which just turned me on immensely. Because you don't have wind, and you've got frost and snow, and so especially up here on campus, where it's particularly cool because you've got trees that are separated out of the forest a little bit by the landscaping, and you've got these street lights, that it's like a fairyland here in the winter. It's so cool to wander around. And I got very caught up in the whole idea of black and white, and negative and positive, and the things we think of as being one way that are actually the other way. And also, I'm in love with negatives. You know, I am a cult member. And there is a particular silvery beauty to a photographic negative that I miss. You know, I've completely embraced the digital age, but I do miss that negative thing. And so I really enjoyed playing with negatives. And for hidebound traditionalists, this doesn't look much like photojournalism. But one of the things that the Snedden program has allowed me to do is experiment and to try different things. To me, one of the most powerful things in photojournalism is the picture story, or using multiple images to tell a narrative where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And the canvas for that used to be the magazine double truck, the 2-page spread, or the newspaper double truck. That canvas has gone away. And so, like most photojournalists, I'm looking for new ways to tell those stories, new ways to have multiple pictures work. And this work is experimental. I'm pretty happy with it, but it's not the standard thing. You know, you think of ice as being white or clear. Well, yeah, at the ice sculpture garden it is, but when it's out on a lake, you look in it, and ice is black, right? And it's fun to play with ice that's black or white. Also had the wonderful opportunity, because of the Snedden funding, to be able to fly some aerials around this country, and I think in the upper Tanana River drainage, and I think that it says much about a place through its landscape. Landscape helps define a place, and for me, photojournalism has always been about place. As Brian said, I've only had 2 jobs in my life. And so I tended to stay in a place for a long time and really try to get to know it. And that's what I attempted to do this winter in Fairbanks, was to get to know this place through photographs and through learning something about the terrain. This picture actually was taken with an iPhone. I don't recommend it as an aerial photography tool, but it does work. And also, some of this work came out of a quote that Charles Mason taught me from Barry McWane, which is, if you really want someone to look at your picture, show them 2 of them and make them look back and forth. And that's another reason for the diptych, to force people to look at them. Just playing with the idea of black and white and negative and positive and the different ways it can look. I love the burn areas up here. They're so cool. Imagine in the summertime it's not as much fun. But trying to reinterpret the landscape a little bit in a way to make the viewer look harder at it, which is really what the core of photojournalism is producing photographs that make people look harder at something that they may have walked by a million times. That's part of what journalists do, is point out things that may be completely normal to you. And trying to, you know, build some tension between pictures. Try to get people to look at things differently because of the multiple image thing. This is Beaver Creek. These are a little bit more along the sort of more traditional vein, but again, it's looking for a way to tell a picture story that doesn't require a 2-page newspaper spread. These same images and these same words might have appeared in a newspaper over that spread. I'm looking for a way to tell stories that could be in print, could be online, could be on a gallery wall. And trying to look for a way to talk about the experience here in Fairbanks, the terrain of Fairbanks, in a way where photographs play off of each other a little bit. And there's C.W. himself. So thank you very much.